In 1999, Takashi Okazaki created a manga based on his love of hip-hop music and American media. This would be known as Afro Samurai, and years later it would be made into a full-blown anime with 5 episodes and would air even on Spike TV with a lot of buzz going around at its initial release. Along with that initial buzz also came a video game from Bandai Namco. It was a hack-and-slash game. It was far from perfect, had a lot of little issues with the game, but overall told the story of the anime, did so in its own unique style, and added a few cool things to the mix in order to make the game interesting. Fast forward to 2015, and the anime's kind of faded into obscurity, most people being like, I remember that, or I always meant to watch it. Did you ever see it? Was it any good? And out of nowhere, boom! We have Afro Samurai 2, the video game. Revenge of Kuma, Volume 1. It's kind of like completely out of nowhere. Caught me off guard this week. However, like the anime that's faded into obscurity, let's hope that this game also fades into obscurity very quickly. Afro Samurai 2 actually has you playing as Kuma instead of actually playing as Afro himself. This is the first disappointment I immediately had with the game, and you never get a chance to play as Afro. You're always playing as Kuma. Similar to the original Afro Samurai, even though we're not playing as Afro himself, the game is a hack and slash. It is a very, very poor hack and slash. Well, acceptable in like 2002, where you're just mashing the square button over and over and over again, that style of gameplay is not really acceptable nowadays. To do a hack and slash right, you need to add some kind of interesting mechanics to the system, whether it happens to be a combo system or a counter system. There's a very tiny bit here, but for the most part, and I mean pretty much everything except for one enemy in the whole game, you just mash the square button over and over again in order to take out all the enemies. There are finishing moves that you can get to help you out, but once you really get going with the finishing moves, they break the game so much, you might as well just mash the square button because you're going to end up getting more gameplay out of it because the battles will take a bit longer. The finishing moves completely break this game. They try to mix things up by having a style system. You have 3 different styles to choose from, but in all honesty, the styles barely change anything up. For example, one will be able to deflect, and you can do a jump over enemies in order to attack them in their back. And then the other 2 are pretty much the exact same, except one of them has a direct single finisher, while the other one is the spin attack that kills everyone. If you're going to do a monotonous button-mashing game, you have to at least include maybe some interesting enemies or maybe interesting boss fights to really drive home the whole battle system itself. That's not existent. There is one boss fight in the entire game, but it really comes down to running away for a while, cutscenes, and then quick time events, and the boss fight's over. As far as your normal battles with enemies go, they're all pretty much the same. They do change up a very tiny bit in appearance, but sometimes it's even hard to tell what different enemies you're even dealing with here, with only a couple, and I mean a couple of them being different at all. And all of them can be defeated the same exact way. Press square a few times to build up a tiny combo, 3 or 4 hits, and then hit circle button. Either doing your straight up single attack finisher or doing the spin, and all the enemies are gone and you're moving on to your next point or your next cutscene. You do level up in the game. For each of the 3 styles, you have a branching skill tree that you easily get points, and it seems like no real rhyme or reason why you're getting skill points. You're just standing there defending or attacking, mashing that square button, and it constantly seems to berate you with, you got a new skill, you got a new skill point, you got a new skill point. Half the time it didn't really make any sense what I was even doing that was earning me this experience for these skill points since you get so many of them. That pretty much has to do with the fact that the game is extremely short, so they want to make sure you can possibly get as much skill points as you can. The one thing that's really disappointing though with the game is, being Volume 1, they end up blocking the last part of each of the skill tree until Volume 2. You won't be able to unlock the final skill of the skill tree for any of the styles even though you'll probably have plenty of points left over to do so until Volume 2 is released. And the way this game was made, and I don't even know if they're gonna end up making a Volume 2, so it would have been cool to at least have included that final bit. Also, with the skill trees themselves, it's very minor things like a speed increase, a health increase, a power increase, and a couple of them do have a different finisher, a more powerful finisher that you get near the end of the skill tree, which does come in handy, but still the finishers are all one-hit instant kills, so it doesn't really affect all that much. When you're not hacking and slashing enemies by mashing the square button, there is platforming to be had, because that's exactly what this game needs. Honestly, Versus Evil, you shouldn't have tried to do platforming in this game because you didn't do it very well whatsoever. The platforming consists of really only two areas in the whole game, one where you're climbing up ice waterfalls, and another one where you have to climb on moving blocks that are moving around. The problem is the camera is very poor in the game. It's all stagnant camera shots. You have no control over the camera whatsoever, so wherever it is, you have to adjust, and this can be difficult to kind of judge how far you're supposed to make a jump. Sometimes it may look like a ledge is able to be jumped on, which isn't the correct one, and you just fall straight through the platform and end up dying. There were a few times where I pressed a button in order to kind of jump or move, and the game instantly cut to a loading screen, which I thought meant I did well, and I was moving to the next part, but in fact, I actually died with no indication that my character had died. It just went to a loading screen, had to load up back to the previous checkpoint. While the game is not criminally filled with glitches, there was quite a few glitches and bugs that I ran into, with my character floating in place sometimes, or, like I mentioned earlier, falling straight through platforms. There was also a few times where the game just completely messed up on me. At one point in the game, it completely soft-locked and I actually had to reset it. It didn't crash on me at all during the course of my gameplay, but just that one freeze and the short amount of time it took to get through the game was disappointing enough. Longtime fans of Afro Samurai may be just itching to finally get their hands on something new with the series since it's been so long, but you gotta fight the urge, because this game is not worth your time even from a story perspective. I know from the Afro Samurai lore that the manga was different than the anime, and that the anime I think is different from the game universe, and this does follow up the original Afro Samurai game, so those who played that, or played it recently at least, would be able to easily follow along. But the storytelling is so disjointed and not told well at all. You're jumping from present to past to present, just over and over again. There is some cool cutscenes with the manga style that is told, and the artwork is quite nice for that, and that alone, as the graphics itself in the game are very poor. And I don't like harping on graphics at all, but these really aren't that great, especially on a modern PC game or PS4. One of the last things about the game I have to mention, though, is its length. The game is only about 2 hours long at most. With all my deaths, sometimes a lot of it from being glitchy, or even pausing the game at one point just to laugh at just exactly what was going on because the game was being such a mess, I ended up clocking in only about an hour and 45 minutes total with the game in order to get from start to finish. There's no multiple difficulties, there's no collectibles, there's nothing to make the game go any longer. It's just a very linear, straightforward storyline, and because of that, you're going to be done in less than 2 hours. That will be a great thing for those who, unfortunately, who end up picking up the game, because about 15 minutes in, you're going to be begging to be done with it already, or just flat out turn it off even at that point. But for those who want the most bang for their buck, and I don't like to talk about game length. I'm one of those people that can buy a game at full price and get 7 hours out of it, but I always found if that 7 hours was very enjoyable, then it's good. But I cannot help but mention that the game not only has all these problems, not only is it glitchy, not only does it have issues at crashing and stuff, but it's also very short. One really small bright spot about the game is the soundtrack. Unfortunately, as of this, I wasn't able to find a track listing or find the artist that contributed to the soundtrack. It is nowhere near as good as the anime soundtrack or the original video game's soundtrack, but it does have that really cool mix of like feudal Japan with hip-hop and overall is a joy to listen to. If you like that style of music, you're definitely gonna at least want to maybe check out a couple of the songs from the soundtrack. In conclusion, from someone who plays a lot of bad games and has enjoyed quite a few of them, especially the so bad they're good kind of games, Afro Samurai 2 doesn't even deliver on that front. It's not overly glitchy enough to be unbelievably hilarious, and the gameplay isn't so bad that you can kind of have fun messing with it. It just is a very poor game. It feels cheap. I mean, like, really cheap. Even from the main menu, just looking at it and pressing it, like, there's no options in the options menu. It feels like the game was completely thrown together at the last minute, or was worked on for a week and then released out to the public as fast as possible. The game is supposed to be broken up into 3 volumes, with this one being the first volume. I'll be surprised, honestly, if we even end up seeing Volume 2, and especially if we end up seeing Volume 3. I do think available currently on PSN, and I'm not sure about Steam, you can actually buy a bundle where you get all the volumes for a lower price. Just avoid at all costs. Don't even think about biting the bullet and, oh, it can't be that bad. This is honestly one of the worst games I have played so far this year. My final score is a 2 out of 10. This game is not only poor, it's disappointing, because I actually like the original Afro Samurai game, and this is not a very good follow-up whatsoever. So with that, though, it's going to wrap up this review of Afro Samurai 2 Revenge of Kuma, Volume 1. Thank you for watching, and of course, I hope you enjoyed.